Mises on the campaign trail, and his signature campaign issue was shutting down the regulatory state. He has founded multiple multi-billion-dollar companies and is an unapologetic defender of capitalism. In 2022, he founded Strive, a financial services firm. That is amazing, and my phone just died. Without further ado, let's welcome Vivek Ramaswamy to the stage.
Love you guys. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. I got to tell you that libertarian rapper career, my stage name used to be Devek. I don't know. Got a sense for how well that worked out. I took the next logical step after being a successful rapper, which was becoming an analyst at a biotech-focused hedge fund, where I worked for 7 years. So it was a short-lived career, but it was good. I will say I am probably unique amongst candidates who have run for the Republican nomination for U.S. president in that I have voted as many times for a libertarian for U.S. president as I have for a Republican. And well, look, I'll take this off here. I'd like to hold this mic. It's a very formal podium for a libertarian conference here. Things have changed around here, I think. The truth is, I've been skeptical of both major political parties for a long time. Republican Party, Democratic Party. I'm skeptical of any third parties, and I'll get to that in a second as well. I'm skeptical of the modern Democratic Party. Let's start with that. The reasons for that are obvious. The conventional wisdom is the current Democratic Party is a socialist party. I don't think so. I think it's increasingly leaning in a Marxist direction, teaching people that your identity is based on your race, your gender, your sexuality, the attributes you inherit on the day you're born, riding the tectonic plates of group identity and an invisible power relationship with every other human being, and that we have to correct for those power relationships in the name of equity. A party that in the name of diversity has sacrificed now true diversity of thought. A party that in the name of equity has sacrificed true equality of opportunity. A party that in the name of inclusion has created a culture of exclusion where certain points of view just aren't welcome. Now weaponizing the justice system to go after their own political opponents. No, that's not in any sense a Democratic Party that stands for democratic principles. It is increasingly a tyrannical vehicle for advancing Marxist policies in the United States of America. So yes, I am skeptical of the Democratic Party. But I will also tell you, I'll take that. That sounds good. Because it's important. We're going to call out everybody here. What was the old Ron Paul quote? Truth is treason in their empire of lies. That's the modern Democratic Party. And truth is treason today, but we're going to speak the truth and commit treason of truth right here in Washington, D.C. I have also been a longtime skeptic of the establishment wing of the Republican Party. Think about the party that led us into war in Iraq in 2004. It wasn't really the Democrats. It was the Republicans in the wake of 9/11. I was against it at the time, as I am today. Look at the party that not only give us the crony capitalist conditions for the 2008 financial crisis. People miss this. This was not greed that caused the 2008 financial crisis. This was government-ordained policy that created the financial crisis, from the actions of the U.S. Federal Reserve to raining money from on high like manna from heaven. That's what gave us the 2008 financial crisis. And by the way, I didn't tell you my own story here. My parents came to this country 40 years ago with no money. You know what? When I graduated from college, I didn't make any bones or apologize for it. I did not focus on anything else other than winning through the system of free market capitalism. So I joined a hedge fund in 2008. Bad year to get a job in New York City, turns out. But we saw what happened. Even worse than the lead up to that financial crisis was actually the bailouts using our own taxpayer money to bail out financial institutions that made well for themselves when times were good, but expected the taxpayer to bail them out when the times went bad. Yet who did it? It wasn't the Democratic Party. It was the same party that led us into the Iraq War. It was the same party that had actually supported many of the policies that gave us that crisis, including a U.S. Federal Reserve policy in the first place, that then bailed out those same financial institutions. So yes, I am also skeptical of a long-standing tradition in the Republican Party to engage in crony capitalism as well. And we're going to come back to this because I worry that that ghost of Dick Cheney is trying to resuscitate itself in certain corridors of the modern Republican Party. So I'm skeptical of the Democratic Party. I'm skeptical of the historical establishment wing of the Republican Party. I know you all heard from RFK Jr. earlier today. And I'm just going to be calling it out like I see it across the board, 360 degrees here. I respect his commitment to medical freedom, something that many of you in this room share as well. I will first acknowledge that. Got to respect somebody who stands for actual medical freedom. But RFK Jr. is in no sense a libertarian in any meaningful sense of the word. I mean, the fact is, you cannot say you support free speech in this country if you also have, even in the past, advocating for imprisoning those who have spread climate disinformation. The Second Amendment is not a recommendation, it is a right. And I'm going to say this, call it like it is. I am proud to be not only the only Republican candidate who came to PorcFest this year, but also to be the only presidential candidate of any party that did not require people to disabuse themselves of their Second Amendment rights in order to enter those grounds either. And I don't think that you're a libertarian if you behave like the other side. I'm glad he's skeptical of the government narrative on vaccines, but he's completely imbibing the government narrative on climate change. I'm glad that he supports actual medical independence, but the fact of the matter is somebody cannot oppose nuclear energy in this country and support an expansion of the regulatory state on grounds of environmentalism or consumer protection and in any way pose as a libertarian. It's just a fact of the matter. So I don't really bend the knee to one particular political party or another. Democrat Party, Republican Party. I respect some elements of what everybody has to say in respecting freedom, but RFK is in no sense a libertarian either. But I want to actually call out not everybody else who isn't in this room, but to ask a hard question to this room. Because I think the Republican Party, I have said this, is at a crossroads. I'll say a word about this, but they're not going to come to this room. The Republican Party is at a crossroads. We face a choice. Right now, it is a choice, a fork in the road in the conservative movement between resuscitating that ghost of Dick Cheney, reviving a post-9/11 surveillance state. Back then, it was the Patriot Act. Today, what is it? It is the expansion. It's not the renewal of FISA 702. It is the expansion of FISA 702. That's what Republicans are rooting for by large numbers today. The same party that took us into the Iraq War is now forking over more of your own taxpayer dollars to Ukraine. So one fork in the road for the Republican Party is to go the way of Dick Cheney of the past. Yet the other path that's now emerging as the fork in the road is to go in favor of what they will call industrial policy, but what increasingly looks and smells like a right-wing version of a nanny state. And I don't support that either. The right answer there is none of the above. What is the right answer? The right answer has to do with the people who are in this room. That's the right answer. It's a false choice between the new crony capitalism, the new right-wing nanny state alternative to the left-wing nanny state. I say no to that. I also say no to the Dick Cheney neoconservative vision of yesterday. But the right path forward, and that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm here today, actually has to do with those of you who are in this room right now, because you too face a fork in the road. There's a hard question for this party right here to ask itself, the Libertarian Party, which is, what is your goal in 2024? Why are we here? Is it to seek out another best case scenario? Speaking hard truth, 360 degrees. I can't do it I'm not going to stop doing it now. Is it to get 3% as a stretch goal, which would be a great outcome for the Libertarian Party compared to 1% of the last time around? Is that the goal? And to call that a victory and to move on? Or is it to actually take the freedom-centric ideals that those of us in this room share deeply in common and to actually translate that into action? By working and influencing and having a seat at the front of the table of the next administration. That's the question for you to ask yourself. I'm not telling you what the answer is. But the question is, you don't owe me an answer. Nobody owes me an answer. I'm a guest and I'm glad to be here. But the question is, Do you want to get 3% or shoot for that as a stretch goal, or do you actually want to change this country by working together? And I will tell you this, I'm speaking to you as a libertarian at my own core. I have gotten to know Donald Trump over the course of the last several years and the last several months. And you're going to hear from him tomorrow night. And the question is, do you want to influence the next administration or don't you? That is the question for this room to ask. And my thesis for you, you believe it? You all get to speak your mind. I respect that. Libertarians in the room got to speak up. But now the question is, how do you get it done? I believe the future of this country depends on a libertarian nationalist alliance that will save this country. That's what I believe is required. And my challenge to you is, how do we work together to actually restore free speech in this country? So you get to speak your mind as long as I get to in return. How do we actually restore religious liberty in this country? So you are free to worship if you wish to worship how you want in this country. How do we work together to restore the actual Second Amendment, not as a recommendation, but as a right in this country? How do we put an end to a central bank digital currency once and for all in the United States? How do we end the Federal Reserve's failed policies and bring competition to the dollar in the United States of America? No, I love it. How do we shut down the three-letter agencies that populate this infested cities in Washington, D.C.? We're not just reforming it. You cannot reform that beast. You want to get serious, get in there and shut it down. Shut down the FBI. Shut down the ATF. Shut down the CDC. Shut down the U.S. Department of Education. Fire 75% of the federal bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and send them home packing because they never should have had that job in the first place. Rescind every unconstitutional federal regulation that Congress never passed. SEC to FTC to FDA to TSA. I call that 1,000 standing around, by the way. God knows what. Shut it down. So the question is, how do we work together to actually make possible in this country what we have not yet achieved? How do we revive who we are, the Constitution of 1789, the Revolution of 1776? I am sick and tired of standing around here complaining about it, but what I wish to do is to translate this vision into action, because that's what our founding fathers did 250 years ago. You don't get this without making a sacrifice. It's easy to pat yourself on the back and say you say the right things, but if you want to translate it to action, this is our moment to do it. You want to end foreign wars? Great. End foreign aid to every other country around the world that doesn't advance U.S. taxpayer interests. Flatten the tax code while we're at it. Exit the UN. Stop funding the WHO. This is within reach, my friends. And everything I'm telling you, this isn't new for tonight. This is what I've been saying for the last year across the presidential campaign trail. But how do we translate vision to reality? Are we people of words or are we people of action? That is the question before us right now. Well, who's going to get it done? That's the question for you to ask yourself. You don't owe me an answer to that question. You owe yourselves and this country an answer to that question. And I'll tell you this, 2 core principles going forward in this country. The people we elect to run the government should be the ones who actually run the government, not the shadow government in Washington, D.C. And the sole moral duty that those leaders owe, the only moral duty of a U.S. elected leader is to a U.S. citizen right here at home, not somebody else halfway around the world, right here at home in our own country. It's not too much to ask. It's not a black idea or a white idea or a Democrat idea or a Republican idea. These are American ideals that we secured in 1776. And I think we live in a 1776 moment right now. And I've come here today to tell you, from one former libertarian rapper to an audience of libertarians here with us today, let us move from words to action. Let us actually take the policies that you and I care about and turn them into reality and have a front seat to make sure we get it done. And if I have anything to do with it, I believe many people in this room should be advising, if not directly involved, in the next administration of the United States of America. That's why I'm here today. So do what is right for America, fight for our Constitution, make George Washington proud, make Mises proud, make Hayek proud. That's how we make America great again. That's why I'm here tonight, and I'm looking forward to talking to my friends Dave Smith and Clint Russell. Let's get them out here. Thank you, guys. God bless you and your party, and may God bless our United States of America. Let's actually get the job done. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. You said it. Who said that? Free Ross, pardon Assange, and Snowden deserves to come home. That much we agree on. I said it on day one of the campaign, and if we have anything to do with it, just met Gabriel, Julian's brother. That man should not be in a foreign prison. That's what it means to be free. And by the way, every peaceful January 6th protester deserves a pardon, along with every one of those protesters on day one in this country. That's what it means to stand for one standard of the rule of law in America. Thank you, guys. Couldn't leave that out. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Good to see you. What do you want to say? Right here?
All right. We're going to jump into a moderated debate. I'm going to pass this off to Dave Smith.
Hey! How's everybody doing? Are we having some fun? I think that was pretty cool. All right, so we're gonna start this up here. Angela, how long are we supposed to go for? All right,
30.
We'll figure it out. Someone will tell me when I'm getting kicked off.
30.
Okay, full disclosure, as I kind of host moderate this thing, I love both of these guys. They're my guys. I think it is so cool that Vivek Ramaswamy came to this convention to talk to us. This is something the Libertarian Party has never really had before, where national figures are coming to like address our concerns. And of course, I'm very happy that my boy Clint Russell won the VP nod to be up here.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So broadly speaking, I think the topic for this was how to dismantle the deep state or something like that. One of my favorite things about you, Vivek, I shouldn't say one of my favorite things. My favorite thing about you and what your campaign and your voice has kind of been directing is this kind of, I think one of the things missing from the populist Trumpist movement in this country is a direct focus on a reduction in the size and power and secrecy of government. And it's one thing to kind of say in the abstract, we're going to drain the swamp. But if spending is going up and the spy agencies always have their secrecy, the swamp by definition is not drained. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so look, this is part of the fork in the road in the Republican Party I was talking about. A lot of well-intentioned Republicans believe that you have to reform this administrative state. Fire Christopher Wray, you will hear, and then wait for an applause line afterwards, right? It doesn't work because if you cut off one head of an 8-headed hydra, it grows right back. You have to gut it at its core. And so I am of the belief the only correct answer is actually to shut it down and start from scratch and don't rebuild the same cancer you created in the first place. This is practical. So they say the president can't do this. Actually, beautiful thing about the law is one of the things politicians ought to try is actually try reading it. Turns out the president, there are these civil service protection rules, which I'm against, which say I can't fire you because I disagree with you of your views on abortion or whatever. Fine. Say what you will. Those rules do not apply to mass layoffs. And mass layoffs are absolutely what we need to bring to the DC bureaucracy. And what Elon Musk did to Twitter, we need to bring on steroids to DC. And you know what? Anytime, and here's the other step of this that we don't talk about enough, anytime one of those government officials has pressured a private sector actor to do something that the government official couldn't do directly, We got to disclose that. You called it the Twitter files in the case of one company. I call it the state action files. Anytime a government actor has done something through the back door that they couldn't through the front door, at least we as the public have to actually see it. And I think that combination of transparency and actually be willing to shut down and mass fire large numbers of people is what it's going to take, because no other amount of reform can actually get that job done.
No disagreement, actually. I would just add that what I find confusing is that it was James Comey and Crossfire Hurricane that was responsible for ultimately spying on and attempting to coup Donald Trump. And there's this rhetoric about, well, we need to shut it down and we need to start from new, but it implies that the institution itself isn't the fatally flawed institution. Like, do we need a federal police force, which is essentially what the FBI is? Do we need, thank you, do we need a central intelligence agency which goes around toppling dictators and fomenting coups? And no, the answer should be no.
They topple democratically elected governments too.
Yes.
Let's
in
be
fairness,
fair.
in fairness. So I think that is probably the biggest divide between from our conversations in the past, is like, it seems to me that America got off the path that it was supposed to be on sometime around the foundation of the central bank and the FBI and the
Woodrow
CIA.
Wilson.
Yes. Yeah, the progressive era. So why can't we rewind? Why do we have to not just fire and cut and shut down and rebuild, but rather just shut down, abolish, and be done with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's start with step one, right? Because we've got the long run future, and then we've got the next 12 months. And I think that the moment we live in right now, we cannot let this one slip our hands right now. Is within 8 months, within 9 months, I believe we will be in a position to turn a lot of this into reality. And you got to take one of two risks, right? Because you can't say, I'm going to cut exactly the amount that I need to. None of us is God, okay? The way you got to look at it is there's one of two risks you're going to take. One risk is you're not going to cut enough. You cut fat, but you don't cut enough fat, but at least you're not cutting muscle. The other risk is you're going to say, you know what, I'm taking a risk, but I'm cutting so much that I'm going to risk actually cutting some muscle. That's the risk I think we got to be willing to take. That's the risk we got to take. So that's the next step. And then if we discover that we cut some muscle, right, and something happens that we didn't know about, we're like, oh, no, that was really necessary. I'm open to taking the risk to say we learned that the hard way, and then we will rebuild what we're missing. So that's the way I look at it. Okay. Maybe we'll need that step, and maybe we won't. And I suspect in 99% of the cases we'll discover that we didn't. Yeah. But step one is step one. Yeah. And step one is actually making the afuera. Afuera. Well done. So I think that's the way we got it. We got to bring a little Javier to the United States of America.
Completely agree.
On steroids.
Mucho Milei.
I love meeting that guy earlier this year too. He's an animal. So I think he'd be a good advisor to the next administration, I think.
You, of course, when you met him, I think I remember you said that he's a big Mises guy and you're more of a Hayek guy.
Yeah, he actually is a big Rothbard guy. Actually,
he's
a big Rothbard guy.
Now,
what he told me, because I said that beforehand, and then when he saw me, he's like, actually Rothbard. So I said,
okay, I can only get so erect now. This is a little bit off topic, but since this Milei thing came up, you said you're more of a Hayek guy. Have you not read Mises? And if you have read Mises, how could you possibly prefer Hayek?
Well, it's a first love kind of thing. It's a first love kind of thing, right? Because Mises is, in the modern sense of the word, what you'd call more based, okay? But Hayek was actually the constitutional liberty was my first love.
Fair enough.
And so you gotta what brought you in, right? Everybody here has something that drew them in the first time. And so for me, it was at the age of 19 reading the Constitution of Liberty.
Fair enough.
And his case for not just the economic, because I'd read Nozick before, and I was underwhelmed, right? I don't know about how all of you feel, but Nozick is brilliant, right? I mean, IQ off the charts. But he made a case that didn't tap into the moral case for actually being a libertarian. And I think Hayek did that in a beautiful way. He made the moral case for capitalism, that not only was it the right system, it was the only just system. And I think the Constitution of Liberty, the part that stood out to me the most, actually, and bringing me back to my own, late teen years here, is he said, you don't actually respect your fellow human if you condescend upon them so much to say that their own worth is tied to their financial worth,
Right? So if the whole premise for the redistributionist project was that your own financial worth is tied to your moral worth, that means you are morally so worthy that you deserve some iota of distribution. That means it causes you to still adopt that same premise and say, well, therefore, because you have less, you're still worth less, which is actually how we operate in an otherwise crony capitalist corrupt system where you're able to buy the favors you want, but it's actually degrading to the very people who you supposedly help. And so that drew me in a way that could speak to a 19-year-old in a way that still leaves me a Hayek guy, even though I can acknowledge that Mises might be the more based. Okay.
All right,
Interesting.
fair enough. It's a fair answer that the guy who brought you into this always has a special place, because to this day I would take a bullet for Ron Paul, and so like just because he was the guy who introduced me to this stuff.
He'll be here on Sunday. You'll have your chance.
Well, I mean, he'd have to be more than be here. It also okay. Anyway,
Could I
don't actually want to.
Can I ask a follow up?
Sure, go
All
ahead.
right, because I like a lot of what you have to say. I genuinely do, and I think that the 75% across the board federal headcount cuts is like that. That is a massive step in the direction of saving this country, and I genuinely mean that. What I don't understand is Donald Trump and your support of Donald Trump in this regard. This is my genuine belief that the FBI actively worked to undermine a sitting president. I think they're also arguably, if not factually, responsible for the assassination of civil rights leaders and former presidents and other political leaders. Yeah. Why, in God's name, is Donald Trump talking about building a new building for the FBI in Washington, D.C.?
So look, so I'm Vivek Ramaswamy. And,
I know. I'm sorry.
Also, listen,
and
the guy loves buildings. I mean,
but what I will say is, I'll say a few things about this. Are all of you? So he's speaking here tomorrow night, right? You guys invited him. He's coming here tomorrow. Are you going to agree with him on 100% of what he says? Nope. Do I agree with 100% of his policy positions? No. Okay. But do I believe that he is the best? I mean, who's going to be the president? Is he going to be the Democratic nominee or the Republican nominee? I think Donald Trump is unambiguously. I mean, come on. Look, I invite you to dream on Aerosmith. We got to play the Aerosmith, right? I mean, I'm being honest here.
I mean, guys, listen,
I mean, let's be really honest.
I understand booing about stuff like you disagree with, but he's kind of right about that one. I mean, his prediction is it's going to be a Democrat or a Republican. I mean, it's a safe bet.
But let me actually lift the curtain a little bit, because you guys should be interested in hearing this, and this is not me blowing smoke. This is fact. I have had extensive conversations with Donald Trump about libertarian objectives. All right, I'll just one that's going to be flat out, at least publicly evident. Right? We spoke backstage in New Hampshire after I dropped out of the race about opposition to a central bank digital currency. He did something that I've talked to other politicians about this. The CDBC or whatever you'll hear from certain other candidates.
CBDC.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying the way that yeah, exactly. But I'm giving you what you'll get from other.
Sorry. I am autistic. I'm a libertarian.
What you get from other. What you get from a lot of politicians. Yeah, the CDBC. Yeah, that bad thing that my consultant told me is a bad thing. Donald Trump doesn't do that. He asked me, "What the hell is that?" Yeah. And we had an honest conversation. Say, okay, this is what it is. He said, all right, well, what's the reason they want it then? Right? He's curious. And I believe that if you can't state the best argument for the other side, you don't know what you actually believe. That night, he didn't change his mind. 3 nights later, he's on the stump in New Hampshire. I'm still backstage. I'm listening. Wait a minute. He says, it goes on stage and says, I'm here tonight to announce that I am opposed to the creation of a central bank digital currency. And he has stuck to that position ever since. And so I think here's what I will say. I think the Republican Party and its leadership and the next president of the United States will be a better version of itself because of the existence of the people in this room. Now, I want that influence to be as great as it possibly can be. And then there's a tactical question. Is that going to be by getting X percent, 3%, whatever it is in a ballot? Or is it going to be some other means of actually making sure that we don't just talk about, but shut down agencies, actually get in there and flatten out as much of the federal government we can so we can have as low and flat of a tax code as possible so anybody can achieve what they want in this country, actually end endless foreign aid to conflicts that are marching us closer to World War III. How do we turn that into reality
And I believe it is unambiguous. And I know many of you are going to disagree, and that's fine. But I believe in this election cycle, unambiguously, the best chance to do that is making sure of two things. One is not only is Donald Trump the next president of the United States, but those of you in this room have an opportunity to shape the way we actually run this country. I spoke to him in the last couple of days, and he says, we want to work together with the libertarians. I take him at his word, and if I have anything to do with it, you have my word, I can give you that you are going to make sure the policies you care about in this room are translated into action in the next administration. Yeah. That's what I could tell you.
Oh, it's all right.
Well, thank you. That was like a friendly comment. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was a friendly comment delivered in the most aggressive way I've ever seen. You should be fucking vice president, man. And you're like, all right.
I've never been threatened into being VP before.
I was. That's how it happened with me. But
that is fair. Well, let me ask this question, and I'll ask this to you, Clint, because look, there's definitely a point here that Vivek is bringing up, that whether we like it or not, the reality of the situation is we live in this kind of uniparty, two wings, and it's gonna be a Democrat or a Republican who's the next president. Do you think that, given the fact that Donald Trump was president for 4 years, do you think we've seen much to indicate that the people in this room will be shaping his policy in any meaningful way if he's in again?
This probably isn't going to make me any friends in the GOP, but I'm going to tell the truth because that's what I promised you guys on the stage just about an hour ago. I'm very concerned about some of the maneuvers that I've seen and some of the rumors that I've heard, particularly when it comes to the foreign aid package that was passed just last month. You have Lindsey Graham, you have a handful of Boris Johnson, God knows how that fat idiot would know, but he also said that Donald Trump was ultimately the one that was responsible for greenlighting $100 billion additional dollars that are going to proxy wars against nuclear powers. That is not America first. That is not make America great again. That is neoconservatism. That is Nikki Haley. That is the person that you ended their political career. Tell me why Donald Trump is better, because I can't see it. I don't understand what's happening there.
So I had somebody in it.
So fucking good.
So I got a what was supposed to be a gotcha question when I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, which is, how would you have voted on that aid package? Would you have voted no? I would have voted no. That's what I could tell you. I'm here as me. And I think that I applaud you for, I don't think that advances the best interest of the United States. And look, do I think that TikTok is a good platform for our youth? No, I don't. I think it's disgusting. Do I believe the U.S. government should be in the business of banning individual companies right off the bat, willy-nilly shooting from the hip? No. So I would have voted no straight down the line. And I disagree with my Republican colleagues who voted yes. That'd be the answer to that question.
I appreciate that.
Can I absolutely, that's a great answer. Can I ask you just a follow-up on that? Why do you think there was this push to ban TikTok? Do you think it's really because, as they say, it's partially owned by a Chinese subsidiary, or is it because of, let's say, a different foreign nation?
Well, I think you're talking about you're talking about a foreign nation beginning in Silicon Valley. Actually, it's Facebook lobbying is the reason we passed that bill. That's what I believe. I actually believe the reason is
he's not entirely wrong. They're
literally taking the same videos from TikTok and putting it on Reels. Who do you think is actually benefiting from that? Who was lobbying for the first version of this the first time around? So I have no patience for people in Washington, D.C. who now suddenly have discovered a concern for China, didn't give a second care about 60 Chinese transformers in our electric grid, didn't say anything about that. But suddenly they decided TikTok was the issue. And you know what? Here's the way I look at passing laws. Even if you agree with the law or not, at least I can respect it if you're applying the same rules of the road, right? So if there's some kind of behavior you don't want, then have a debate about banning that behavior. But the idea of putting a prior restraint or a ban on one particular company, I think is a dangerous precedent in the United States. Now let's take the example of, have you seen a case of this social media company that a lot of kids are using, influencing what users see to prop up the CCP? Yes, we have, and I'll tell you exactly how. Have we seen an instance of your social media account being shut down if you claim that the COVID-19 virus originated in a lab in China? Well, yes, you've seen that at large scale. Were your own posts censored if you said it? Was your own account censored if you said it? Yes, it was. Was there a state actor, a nebulous puppet master behind the scene, a Wizard of Oz, who was getting those tech companies to do it? Yes, there was. And that government was the United States of America's government. And you know the companies that were doing it were YouTube, TikTok, not YouTube, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. They act Twitter before Elon acquired it. So that's what I think is this whole thing is a farce. It's a smokescreen they've created. Do I think that TikTok is good for a good influence on young people? No, but that's a separate question from asking whether you're going to pass a bill banning the existence of one random company. It's unprincipled, it's unconstitutional, and that's why I'm against it. You can both at once believe something is bad for someone while saying it's not the government's job to be in the business of banning it.
I appreciate that.
Couldn't agree with that more. Do you think, Clint, if there were to be, say, like the libertarians, I think a lot of people in this room probably agree. I mean, look, the reaction obviously has been, there's been things that you've been on your feet cheering for what Vivek's saying. There were a few things that you had a mixed reaction to, a few things that drew some boos. What do you think, Clint, is like the biggest obstacle for most of these people in the room, if you could speak on their behalf or for yourself?
Yeah.
That is what you just can't get over the hump to say, okay, I can swallow this pill that we may agree on some issues with Donald Trump. Certainly all the right people hate him.
Yeah.
But I can't find
appreciate
myself
that.
pulling the lever for him.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was thinking about that right before we came out here, and it was actually a tagline in your speech about turning words into action. The issue has been that the GOP, throughout my entire life, has not turned words into action.
a businessman. I chose to run for president over the last year. If you guys watch the GOP primary debates, you'll know that I was not a favored child of that party's establishment, okay? But I'm here because I care about the country. The future direction of not only the Republican Party, but even the America First movement is actually yet to be defined. Right? The America First movement is one wing of the Republican Party, now the majority, that stands in opposition to the neocon view of yesterday. The neocon, what is that? Surveillance state, expand it, foreign wars, keep the war machine running, and the money printing machine running. That's now receding, but you have the America First movement that still needs to now play that forward, right? You got the Dick Cheney wing, but play that forward. The future of America First is still being defined as we speak. And I want you all to understand, this is a major opportunity. I see myself, I believe it is my responsibility to play a role in shaping this for the better rather than the worse. I don't believe in recreating a mirror image of the left-wing nanny state in the form of a right-wing nanny state and calling it industrial policy because it sounds better. I believe the future is combining that strand of the America First movement that speaks to me. National pride in this country, pride in who we are, restoring purpose for people who lack it, and say that we pledge allegiance to the United States of America because of what it represents. Not because it's a geographic space, but because there are certain ideals enshrined in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, to combine that with the policy vision that 98% of us agree on in this room right here. That's the opportunity sitting in front of us. And I think that if we go the direction of just, hey, saying that this is a separate silo and we view that as oppositional, you will not have the influence of shaping it. I think it will be an opportunity to shape the future direction of this country by fusing those libertarian and positive national pride-oriented nationalist instincts that actually make our country the best version of itself. And I am here to make sure we don't squander that window, because it's not going to present itself again. It's going to be baked 8 years from now. This is our chance to actually get that right, and that's what our founding fathers stood for. Yeah. That's what I stand for today.
All right, so I think the kind of disconnect here, and look, I know I'm moderating this, but obviously everybody knows my bias.
You have opinions, David?
I've occasionally. I think the disconnect here is that I highly doubt that anyone in this room would kind of agree with your point that Donald Trump opposing the war in Iraq on that stage in South Carolina and telling Jeb Bush his brother lied us into Iraq was an amazing moment. That his rhetoric about America first is substantially preferable to neocon rhetoric about spreading democracy. But the issue is you kind of have these 4 years where he clearly got rolled by his deep state at almost every single turn. And then as Clint mentioned, just the other day, he's bragging about how the aid to Ukraine is a loan, not a gift, and how he influenced that. By the way, it's a loan with 0% interest and no enforcement mechanism of them paying it back. So it's very different from a gift. And so it just seems to me like he's giving us these indications that while he might say the right thing, has he learned anything? Like, and also just some of the people being floated around. You know, I've heard rumors of Marco Rubio being considered for VP. I mean, the guy, we're not big fans of Rubio here. The guy, now I've heard rumors about great people, including yourself as well, but like the question is like, has he learned is there any indication that he's actually learned how to maneuver once in power?
So let me say, I'll give you my word on this. And then I think we got smart minds here next to me up here. Let's talk about vision and actually where we want to go rather than, person. I mean, because how much further are we going to go, right? You could talk about personalities and individual people. That's less valuable than actual vision of where we're headed. But you asked a question, and I'm going to answer it. So here's my view. I ran for president for the first time this time around, and I learned a lot of things that I did not know before I entered this game, okay? There are a million things I would do differently in my own campaign. Not ideological policy things, a few things maybe, but the operations of it, just running in the sport of politics, a million things you learn, such that if I were advising somebody to do it again, or if I was, God forbid, ever doing it again, you were going to understand what you didn't know the first time around. I know for a fact Donald Trump would say the same thing about the fact of coming in from the outside, not knowing the first thing about politics, coming in from the world of business, but I think that's an advantage. And then saying, you know what, am I going to run for a second term if I already did everything perfectly the first time? There'd be no reason to run for a second term. And so it's my view that we have an opportunity to shape for the better the future direction of the America First movement. Do we want to seize it or not? I believe we do. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing every bit of what I am doing. That's why we have now an official opposition in the Republican Party platform from the top down to the opposition of a central bank digital currency to backdoor censorship from tech companies in ways that we did not several years ago. And I think that this is the direction of the future. Take that positive national pride strand of the America First movement, combine it with the libertarian core of the Constitution, the libertarian bones on which the Constitution was written, with 3 branches of government, not 4, and a Bill of Rights that has, say what you will about it, the best and greatest guarantor of actually protecting individual rights of any other nation in human history. Combine those 2 things, that's our future ahead, and that's why I'm here. And you know what? Is anybody perfect? We're going to say this. Am I perfect? Is anybody in this room perfect? Is anybody God? Raise your hand if you're God. I'm not. Okay, just Dave Smith.
Sorry, yeah.
Couple of them back there too, so you're gonna have to duke it out.
He'll be here
But
on
for the
Sunday.
rest
His
of
name's
you-
Ron Paul.
But for the rest of you, none of us is God. But the beauty of this country is that we're not perfect, but we aspire to perfection.
Yeah.
And the left makes this mistake. They do the same thing. Well, Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder. Therefore, the nation was started in 1619 and we abandoned the Constitution because it was written by slaveholders. No, we are fallen human beings. But I would rather live in a country that has ideals and has people who fall short of them than to live in a country that doesn't have any ideals at all. And you know what? That's what the United States has founded on, is the pursuit of perfection. So don't turn your back on that. Help us pursue perfection and the vision that we set into motion. That's my ask for you. And I would say let's go back to talking about policies and ideas.
Sure thing. Absolutely. Okay. So in terms of policies, I think that here's one area where we might differ a bit. One of the things you ran on was kind of a crackdown of trade relations with China.
I would say crackdown of our economic dependence for vital attributes of our life from China. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Clint, what do you think about the idea of that?
Well, I'll just ask a follow-up before I jump through this TV screen. How do you decide? How do you approach this from a libertarian free market perspective, but also have the president who's running on, I'm going to dictate what materials, what supplies are vital to this nation, and therefore sanction or tariff or whatever to diminish the supply coming out of China? I don't understand.
Yeah. So beautiful question. Okay. This is a question of, I'll give you an analogy from the Trojan War. Okay. So Greece would have never defeated Troy by tearing down the walls of Troy. The walls of Troy were too hard to scale. So they gave the gift that they knew that Troy could not resist, the gift of the Trojan horse, which they then used as the vehicle to burn it down from within. And I think in many ways, China has done this by viewing capitalism, not real capitalism, but a perverted form of it, as the Trojan horse that they've used to actually burn us down from within. I'll explain what I mean. Is it capitalism if one end of that party, so let's say China says that the United States, or let's use the word of BlackRock. I'll give a real world example. BlackRock manages U.S. government dollars from California's pension fund and New York's pension fund that require them, the government actors require them as a condition of managing their money, to say that companies like Exxon and Chevron cannot actually maximally burn fossil fuels in the United States. They have to adopt Scope 3 emissions caps. Yet that same company, exact same company, as a condition for entering business in China, had to lobby for lower listing standards for Chinese companies in the United States, and is actually one of the largest shareholders of PetroChina, to whom they don't apply those same Scope 3 emissions caps. I'm sorry, that's not capitalism. That is a crony capitalism in reverse.
That's true.
That is state-directed capitalism. That is mercantilism. So we cannot delude ourselves into just reciting the same slogans, by the way, as that neocon wing of the Republican Party did 40 years ago. We're not going to just recite those mantras, because that game isn't capitalism. It is us pretending like we're indulging in international capitalism when we're actually trading with a mercantilist actor.
Yeah.
So against that backdrop, my view is, can we depend on that same country for our own defense industrial base? That doesn't make any sense. Now, maybe some of you think we don't need a defense industrial base, and that could be a coherent view, and you're allowed to have that view. But for those of you who actually agree that there's some minimal defense industrial base that the U.S. requires, it is completely incoherent for the U.S. to depend on that counterparty for providing the very defense industrial base that's supposedly defending against their threat. It doesn't make any sense. And so that's my position, which I think takes into account the reality of what we're actually facing in this unique circumstance, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater and say we somehow give up on free trade in the first place, and we give up on trade as a way to actually reflect Adam Smith's vision for the people who are actually playing by the same rules of capitalism.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the clarification. It does answer a lot, but I view all trade wars, mercantilism. I view all of it as band-aids on bullet wounds. I really do. I see it as ultimately the reason that our industrial base has been outsourced to China is because we closed the gold window.
Well, a lot of regulations here.
Well, I mean, it's really a large product of 1913, the Federal Reserve Act, and then closing the gold window in 71. You look at the industrial base; it's just it evaporates over those following 50 years. I don't think that's a coincidence. Now,
We're still producing a lot of paper money.
Well, no, that's true. I mean, but that's really what we're dealing with right now. Is that while we import a lot of actual goods that are being produced by China, and we ought to be appreciative because we couldn't afford to buy them if they were being made in America. What our main export is paper, green paper. That's what we export. That is not a foundation that's sustainable either. And I think that tariffs or any sort of, these are all just like pinpoint targets on what is ultimately a wound that is fatal. Yeah. And we have to end the Federal Reserve if we're going to resolve that.
So, I'll say two things.
Of course, go ahead.
When's Ron Paul coming?
Ron Paul will be here Sunday night.
Sunday night. All right. So I'll say two things in response to this. First is, we're not going to, here's a deep agreement. We're not going to beat China by being at China. Okay, that much I definitely agree with. Look at the central bank digital currency. The main argument for it in the United States is that China's doing it. Why is China doing it? They're doing it because they want to be able to wipe your bank account clean if you say something that the government doesn't agree with. So keeping up with the Joneses or the Jinpings is not an answer for why we do something here in the United States. So there we deeply agree. You know what country banned TikTok before the United States did? China, actually. So we're not going to beat China by being China. The point of monetary policy, you're not going to find daylight between us. I think that our dollars should be pegged to commodities that actually have real value, purposefully tie the hands of the federal government. Now, that's a hard answer. But China I think that is a necessary but not sufficient answer to the question.
Okay.
Because I think China has understood that the gain from trade model only works if you have a commercial actor on the other side. But if somebody else is guided by non-commercial goals, engaging in a system that was designed for actual engaging in mutual commerce, they're able to advance political goals through a vector that was exclusively designed for trade. And I think that's the trap we've fallen into. And you know what I want to avoid? I don't want to talk foreign wars on one side of the world. I don't want a foreign war on this side of the world either. But in order to wake up to that reality, we got to say that if you're not playing by the same set of rules, open up our trade relationships with Japan and South Korea and India and other countries where we've restricted it. If you actually want to declare economic independence from China, producing in the United States is good, but you got to be open to every other mechanism to do it too. So I think that's where we might find some common ground.
Okay. Very good. All right, so let's talk a little bit because the broad topic of this was about the deep state, but we were covering a lot of things. But I will say that here's an area where I do think there's some daylight between the two of you. I hear you talk a lot about the FBI and the CIA, the NSA. Another three-letter organization is, which is just as bad, is the DEA, and I know you've kind of taken like a very aggressive posture toward drug cartels in Mexico, even at one point talking about a drone campaign against them. Why don't you just support calling off the stupid, disastrous war on drugs and just get this stuff out of the black market?
So I'll say a word on this here. You guys are. I mean, I'm in the Libertarian Party Convention here as the guy who's defending some level of drug regulation in the United
This
States.
audience is
right?
very high.
Right.
Yes.
I didn't get that sense. No. So here's what I will say is, I favor medical choice. So let's start with common ground, and then I'll go with where we differ. Decriminalize. There's one GOP candidate who favors decriminalizing ayahuasca, ketamine, psilocybin for people who want to use it to treat PTSD. Certainly veterans who are suffering from PTSD. That doesn't exist today. And so I understand the arguments for medical choice, and I'm fully in favor of it. I mean, I've dealt with the FDA. My first business was in biotech, and I've dealt with the same FDA. Don't forget, medical choice means two things. One is we've, of course, been taught the hard way in recent years. Just because the FDA has approved something doesn't mean that you should ever be mandated to take it. But so that one. But just because the FDA has not approved something does not mean that you shouldn't be able to take it. In fact, you deserve to have medical choice, and I stand for the absolute, actual right to try. And so part of what we're seeing here is this is actually administrative blackballing, where we do have a right to try law. Actually, you're thinking about things that Donald Trump passed. The right to try law was actually passed under Donald Trump's tenure. He pushed for it, but the FDA blackballed it. Here's a dirty little secret in the pharmaceutical industry. If you're a company that avails yourself of right to try, so you say that, okay, I'm going to make my therapy available for people who want to try it, even if the FDA hasn't approved it. Even though the law permits you to do that, the FDA will completely penalize you and blackball you on any other application you bring before them. So that's why no company actually does it. So I'm focused on tackling what I think is the next frontier of actually dealing with stupid drug regulation in this country, which is ensuring medical choice for medical purpose. And I think let's cross that bridge first is where I'm at before we have a further discussion. On the issue of fentanyl, which is where I was the most hawkish, okay? I don't think it is a drug overdose if somebody takes something that they don't know contains a substance and then die from it. I have met parents across this country, this is not a joking matter or anything else. Okay, legalize what exactly, right? So but I'm talking about where I was most hawkish is on fentanyl. Well, if somebody's taking a pill that they might have purchased illegally, but the kid takes it and they die not knowing it contained fentanyl, that's not something they signed up for. That's not a fair bargain.
100%.
And that's happening intentionally as well.
But I think
so. My focus is on addressing that crisis. And do we agree on this issue? Of course not. But am I going to be probably the Republican who's going to be most likely to bring the other half of medical choice to bear? I believe that is as far as we're going to get as the next step.
It's fair enough. I think the point that people are making as they kind of heckle here is that the whole point is that you're 100% right. It's that person was poisoned. They didn't OD on drugs. The point is that you will exclusively find this in the black market. You're not going to hospitals there's not an issue of people going to hospitals and getting a pain pill and ODing from fentanyl because it's tested and it's all weighed out.
So this is just an area where we're going to, we agree on 98% of policies. There's going to be got a part of the 2% window where when we look at what part of medical choice do we agree on, if you deserve to take a substance for medical purposes that has not been approved by the FDA, you can't do it today, and I believe you should have the opportunity to do it, from ayahuasca to ketamine to psilocybin. I agree with you.
All right.
Do I think it's going to be net good at this juncture, especially when you're dealing with, and this is where the rubber hits the road for me is, I'm a libertarian for adults. Kids aren't the same as adults.
Agreed.
Okay? And so that's, I think, where I also draw a big line of impact, and that informs a lot of the views and the stances I've adopted.
Okay, well, I 100% do agree with that. Kids, if my kids are listening, you have zero rights. All right. Guys, I've been given the sign that I got to wrap up. I really enjoyed this so much. Thank you, Clint Russell, Vivek Ramaswamy. Thank you guys so much.
Hey, give it up for Vivek. He didn't have to do this. Hey, I just want to say thank you guys for welcoming me. Thank you guys for keeping an open mind. You've had an impact on me. Give a round of applause to Clint and a great moderator, Dave Smith, as well. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the warm welcome.
Both of you guys.
We'll have more coverage from the Libertarian National Convention Saturday when 2024 presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump will speak to delegates. Watch that live at 8 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or online at cspan.org.
All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Pasta was in the room watching that live. So I'm CheeseSlice, in case you didn't know who I was. But we're still here. We're going to be here all weekend covering this convention. And in case you're wondering why we're here, it's because we look at this convention as probably the most significant of all of the political conventions that are going to be happening for this presidential cycle. Give me 1 second. I got to close it. All right. That is much better for me. Now I can hear, now I can think straight. So if you're wondering why we're here, it's because we want to cover the politics of it. And this is a very important convention from the standpoint that these people here are going to be talking about real issues the entire time, because they have a lot of different coalitions within the Libertarian Party, and they don't get along. It's kind of like how the left is very fractured and we don't get along and don't want to work with each other. The difference is the Libertarians with these different factions, they are all committed to working with each other. And that is a huge difference between this party and what the Greens or any of the leftists want to do. Like when we have issues with each other on the left, we're just like, screw you. You're just an alt-right Nazi. And we don't want to work with you. And that's crazy. We all agree, if we're on the left, that the problem of Republicans and Democrats, and we got to get rid of those people, but we're never going to get rid of them if we don't work together. So the reason why we're here is we want to see how that works. And a lot of these people aren't that far away from the positions that a lot of leftists have. I mean, we do have some differences, but there is a ton of overlap with a lot of libertarians and just flat out leftists, especially if you're anti-authoritarian left. I mean, I'm not talking about the authoritarian leftists that tend to gravitate towards the Democratic Party, the authoritarian leftists who love cancel culture. So anyway, this has been a very interesting experience in seeing what's going on here. And I hope that if you're watching these streams, you're taking some of that in. Pasta did get to interview Vivek for about 1.5 questions earlier. And if you were watching live, you got to see that. And he wasn't exactly happy with the result of that. But it's not because, we like people like that. We want to engage with people that we disagree with, because we don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber. And we want everybody being on the same. We want everybody to be getting informed. And the best way to do that is when you work together and you talk to people you disagree with. So is Pasta? Oh, Pasta's coming. So do we want to get him on camera? We might have to upload the other one. Pasta's going to be here in about 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute.
That's it, right?
I think so. Yeah. Do you want to talk to the people? We're still live.
Oh, we're live?
Yeah, we're still live.
We're live. Where can I talk to the people?
Well, you could pull up next to me, or you can try to get on that camera.
Can we both speak together, me and Don, or
Yeah, you want to put Don over here? It's just this crappy mic, though.
why is it just this crappy mic?
Because because we were wrapping up the rest of the set.
But we're off. Are we off Twitter again?
Shoot. Yeah, we're not on Twitter. Well, I mean, we're on Twitter, but we're not on Twitter. Well, say hi to people, man.
Well, it was downstairs.
This is your show, and you're not here talking to them.
Well, I was out
You got
there.
me doing it.
You guys I was down there talking to some people with the Vivek fucking thing going on.
Yeah, just
Well, just tell your people.
tell my people what's up. What's going on? Is this crappy microphone working? But you can hear me. Whose microphone is it? Where do we get this thing at? No. This one here? Why my mic is directional? Like when I hold my microphone, I gotta hold it like this here.
I have a crappy travel.
This is a podcast mic. All right, guys. So we're here. I was just downstairs in the debate hall. You know what really upset me? That there's so much applause for Vivek Ramaswamy. You know, there was so much applause for this guy at this event. Come sit down. Damn.
Yeah, you talk through it. Let me get by there. I'm gonna get a better mic.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There we go. I'll see you next fall. So we downstairs. Crazy day today. We did get some time with Vivek Ramaswamy. We did get a question, so that was very interesting. It's only 15 people on the Pasta to Go show. Man.
I don't think they wanted to listen to it.
Yeah, Ramaswamy is cringe, and it was kind of crazy going over there, seeing a lot of the libertarians applaud him. We've had a lot of people who have pushed him back. There's one guy who came through, and Don was asking, and it was a group of reporters asking Vivek Ramaswamy a bunch of questions. And this one gentleman who was downstairs, who was trying to be part of this whole suspending the rules and whatnot, or changing the rules, or moving to a vote, pretty much using stall tactics, so that therefore that we're going to try to eat up RFK's time, because there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of hardline libertarians that don't want, I don't want to say there's a lot, but there's a decent amount that don't want people like Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, RFK to be part of this whole event. They're not libertarians. And there's the old guard, especially the people who are not in the Mises caucus. Can you get through? And those people who are not in the Mises caucus, who are kind of upset, they're trying to get back some form of power. They're trying to push aside the fact that Angela McArdle and the Libertarian Party and the Mises caucus has invited these people to come along and speak. Very, very interesting. So,
It works, but it picks up everything.
Okay, go ahead.
We can switch.
what do you mean? Sit down.
If this mic works, please.
All right, hold on a second, guys.
Let's
We're
not
gonna-
disturb it. Let's not disturb it.
No. If this microphone works, okay. So I was just giving a little assessment of today. You did get a chance to ask Vivek like about 3 questions, right?
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, whatever you want.
Yeah, it's
You know.
right here. Yeah.
Do you want to show it now?
I mean, it's a whole 13 minutes of all those people asking questions.
Yeah, I mean we can do that. You want to do that?
Well, I think we should cut it up.
Okay, so how about we cut it up and show it up tomorrow during the
Okay,
downtime?
okay,
We can
fine.
do that. But I mean, you want to give us a little analysis of what you thought
There
and
were
stuff.
a couple things I wanted to speak with him about, and he gave some really long and detailed answers that had nothing to do with the questions I asked him. One particular thing, he sounded like he was making a pitch to the Libertarian Party faithful in attendance, the machinery of the Libertarian Party, which these are the people that give it ballot status. They go out and do the work, that gather the petition signatures, and all of the other stuff. Put on this thing. This is a huge event, and so I asked him, because it sounded like, first of all, it sounded like he's operating as a I'm running for vice. I want to be Trump's vice presidential candidate, and in that context, he's talking about Trump and the Libertarians working together to get this done, that done, that done, and that done. So I thought, well, okay. And he said the most important thing is to get Trump elected. So I asked him, I said, are you talking about a fusion ticket? Which you understand, and which he understands, more importantly, means, are you talking about basically asking for the Libertarians to put Trump on their ballot as well? Yeah. And he gave this really long story about all the different things they could work on together, but he never answered my question. So I said, is that a yes or a no? And he didn't like that at all. And then he started again, and I said, no, look, I know you understand the question. You understand the term. So, and then he just went off. So that's one thing he didn't want to answer. What do you actually plan to do? What is your campaign here really about? And he evaded that question.
He almost did the same thing when I asked him too. I said, well, you've pushed replacement theory. And he's like, I didn't push anything. What I've said is, well, that's kind of the same thing. You want to just redefine what push is. You just want to say, and I asked him for his evidence that if he's ever witnessed any illegal, which first of all, no human is illegal. And I met the socialist libertarians. I met 2 of them, and one of them had a pin on that said, no human is illegal. So I'm gonna go get us some because I know we loved. And I told them that I got their numbers. They're like they're having a party tonight. They wanted me to come over, and we should probably go see them because after this convention wraps, they're gonna be doing some stuff over there. And my friend George Johnson is here too. He's a libertarian, and he's representing one of the candidates for president. So I met some people as I was out there schmoozing. But back to Vivek Ramaswamy, he did the same thing to me. He said, "I'm not pushing anything," and I said, "Well, how can you be assured?" That as well, when he didn't answer my question, when he went around, though, well, I'm not pushing. What I said was, you were pushing. But I said, how can you be sure that any of these people who are coming across the border, these illegals that you call coming across the border, are going to vote for a Democrat? I mean, they're very conservative. They're very religious. They are not really going to play into the LGBT community that the Democratic Party is pushing today. In fact, that's one of the first things they're going to do. I mean, and no offense to anybody who's coming across the border, but a lot of people who are coming across the border are poor, uneducated workers. So they really are strong with their religious beliefs. And that's the main thing they're going to look at. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they're going to pay attention to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine as much as they are as like, okay, the state is pushing on, trans genderism and gay and they're like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? And that's their belief. So he kind of said, he goes, you're very much right. A lot of people are very religious and they share our values and turn it into an America First answer. And then he very quickly hushed off. He moved off. I mean, I got about maybe 2 minutes with him. I can't wait to see your footage because I was over here waiting because I was not going to move until he came over. I'm like, I'm holding my ground. Brian's like, I got you. Just Pasta stayed there and he delivered. Brian's been great. Angela's been great. This has been a great convention. Even Jayme has said, like, Don, my question to you is, as a ex-Democrat or an ex-left, we're both still leftists, but witnessing Democratic Party functions, how would you compare? Because Jayme said it the other day. He says that they're very organized. He's very, very impressed with what he sees so far. How do you feel so far with what you've seen? Be honest with us.
First of all, my friend Gary is here, okay? and Gary, I was speaking with him last year. One of the things I did when I was over in Europe was attend an anarchist convention in Switzerland, and I think it was in July. Yeah. And the minute I said to him, first of all, there's this huge convention organized by anarchists. The obvious contradiction in terms, made him laugh. So I just heard that when you asked me about it, because libertarians are also, supposedly not big on structures, big behemoth structures. That said, it's run like a finely oiled machine. I feel as a member of the press that we've been respected in a way that I don't feel as a member of the alternate press or the left press. I've been treated with the Democratic or Republican conventions, and I've attended a half dozen of each. Also, the thing I appreciate here is the diversity of opinion, not just among the people here, but among the people that are at the dais, the people that are speaking and being given a spotlight. A lot of them don't agree with each other on a lot of things. And although there was some pretty heated fighting, in the procedural aspect of it, where the factional, that's the battleground really for the factional battles. Except for that character that walked through the presser with Vivek. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there are some bad apples everywhere. Generally here, the people are very receptive, very, very, okay, go ahead, say what you got to say. And then this is what I think. And I like that. And that's something that doesn't happen at all anymore at the Democratic or Republican conventions. You have unanimity across the board of opinion. It's been bleached of anything that could possibly look like dissent. And, it's a horrible, almost zombie-like ritual that they go through. And that's not here. And that all by itself is attractive to me.
Well, tomorrow's going to be very interesting. Tomorrow, 45 is scheduled to come on by, and it's going to be very, very interesting. And I mean, listen, I thought today the interview with Maj Toure was great. Like, just listening to him, we talk mostly about what is a libertarian going to do? How is a decentralized party going to have a centralized message and build a bigger tent for people like myself to come right in? And he, very different than some of the other people we saw. We did see Jeremy Kauffman. I did give him my card. I said, look me up. Let's make sure we're going to sit down and have a conversation tomorrow. For those out there who don't know, Jeremy Kauffman is the person who runs the New Hampshire Libertarian Party Twitter that has had some very controversial things. And people within his own party, people like Michael Heiss, who is the chairman of the Mises Caucus, people like Angela McArdle, have bumped heads with this guy because the national chair, right? So you got the Mises Caucus chair and the national chair. Dave Smith had a Twitter space and try to solve this problem. Maj Touré was in that Twitter space. And like he said, he's done with these people, some of these knuckleheads. They don't want to open up the door for more people to come in. Yeah. To them, it's more important is who's the better libertarian, who's a true libertarian over here. And, making comments like, socialists want to kill us and that kind of thing. And I went and saw him like, hey, buddy, we don't want to kill you. Just want to let you know that kind of asinine mentality, that CIA talking point, wherever that comes from. And this for quite some time. You've been talking about this.
We don't want to kill you. We just want to rough you up a little bit. Just something just to interrupt. There was one other thing I want to make sure I say that there was one of the interviews that I did today was a gentleman named Peter Jayme, who was running for president as an independent only in the swing states, and he's been targeting the ones that have very low, requirement thresholds to get on, so that he's sure he can do it. And he intends to campaign there very hard. And he says, in essence, the reason I'm doing this, I have my issues I want to argue, which are AI and some other things, but really, I think Donald Trump is the greatest threat to the world or whatever. So this guy's actually targeting, trying to slice off enough of Trump's vote in one or more swing states, and hoping that, and that's just the purpose of his campaign. I'm sure we've seen an awful lot of that kind of wrecking here from people that came here and were disruptive, they're angry over the fact that the libertarians heard Robert Kennedy today, that they're going to hear Trump tomorrow. But as I said, they've heard from a lot of people, and their idea is basically free speech is what we need. If you hear everything everyone has to say, you're in a position to start making some intelligent choices. And so, Kennedy isn't being given very many outlets at all. Libertarian Party gave him one. Yeah. And Trump, outside of his own rallies, isn't given an awful lot of space in the media either, and they're giving it to him too.
Yeah. But I want to make something clear. The reason why Vivek is here, the reason why Trump's coming, the reason why RFK is here, is because the libertarians don't have a serious mainstream candidate for the president, the ticket of the president, and they're not going to. At the end of this thing, whether these three guys who come through, it doesn't make a difference. Nobody's going to really make a dent. So they understand they can mop up some votes over here.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How long are you going to go? Because I got to move the car.
We are going to go 2 more minutes, and we're going to wrap this up. So we're going to wrap this up for the day. One last final thing I want to talk about, Don, is this is something that me and Jayme had talked about. Me and you have talked about this too as well. When as leftist or whatever you want to call us, whatever corner or box you want to put me and Don and Jayme and all of us in, our good friend Gary over here, at the end of the day, we understand there's a mechanism. There's a monster. There's a planet that's going and swallowing other planets, whatever. There's a Thanos out there. There's a globalist, whatever you want to call it. There is an entity that's in place that needs to be beaten back. I think a lot of times libertarians are looked upon as like ideologues sometimes, and they just want to change the laws, and they don't want to necessarily take on that machine, that mechanism. They just want you to get off their back. When we talk to Maj, the attitude was different, and he understands that. And he understands that's why they're roping up this tent. That we have to all understand. We have to come together. There has to be some form of accountability. And what he talked about, or some form of coalition. Excuse me. What he had talked about is that during the Revolutionary War, only 3% of the nation used their guns. 3%. He says libertarians alone can get 10% of the nation to get that going. So what are your thoughts when we close up right now to think about, hey, this machine we have to take on? Have you got a sense that some of these libertarians understand that, or are they just more or less ideologues that just want the government off their back?
I mean, it depends. Are you talking about the people who've been at the dais that we've seen, or are you talking about the walkabout folks that are at the convention?
What about a little bit of both?
I think, first of all, again, I want to emphasize the fact that this diversity of opinion exists here.
Yes.
So I don't necessarily think there is a prototype of a libertarian, at least that I've witnessed, that is either for or against taking on this beast. I think that the main unifying principle among the people that are here is they think that something is terribly wrong and something out of the ordinary has to be done to solve the problem. And I think what they're hashing out basically is exactly what that is and how to go about doing that. Everyone acknowledges that the government is out of control. Everyone acknowledges also that these large private interests are out of control. Everyone has an individual theory about how those things are composed and how they interact, and there's the history of them along a timeline you have Marx, you have Friedman, you have all these other people, and I think everybody here has a little bit of knowledge of some of all of that in one way or another. And so I think what we're watching is a process where groups of people organize themselves and push back. And what happens next is really going to be the product of this process taking place.
Well, that's it for today, guys. We'll be back tomorrow. As soon as Jayme gets up and CheeseSlice gets over and we get over here to this thing, we'll be set up, ready to rock and roll. I will be making sandwiches tomorrow, and I'm here with the crew. Thank you so much, Don Debar, Pasta Jardula, CheeseSlice, Gary, our other friend over there in the corner. I don't know if she wants to be named, but we love you too as well. Margot, we're here at the Libertarian Convention. We will see you soon. It's we're saving the world one meal at a time, but it's time for Pasta and Don to go.
That's right.
Yeah, we got it. Oh, he's got it. Yeah.